and it's 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 1 through 2. David therefore departed from there and escaped to the Cave of Adullam. So when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontented gathered to him. So he became captain over them, and there was about 400 men with him. So this is not a text that's probably unfamiliar to you, but I want to be clear, I am not about to encourage you right now. I am not telling you that you are the mighty man of valor, despite the fact that you're distressed, discontented, in debt. This is not about encouragement. I'm not exhorting you, so I will lay aside my natural proclivity and just give you this picture here. Because in this workshop, I want to give some principles, and the next workshop will focus more on some illustrations. But you have an image here of hiding in a cave. David is hiding in a cave with his relatives, with distressed and traumatized, screwed up people. They're financially screwed up. They're a bunch of unhappy, screwed up people. There's not one attractive, put together, well-to-do, capable, competent, emotionally stable success guru in the midst. He's got a bunch of weirdos. And I think one of the most popular unanswered prayers in the unanswered prayer categories that I've heard over and over again from ministers in prophecies that are made is, God, send me the resources. Send me the reinforcements. Send me the pretty people, God. Send me the billionaires that will just underwrite everything. Send me these success people. Send me somebody with all their teeth. Send me some music talent, Lord. Send me some money, Lord. Money from heaven. Just send it, Lord. Money cometh. Those people aren't coming to your cave. Why would they? Like, why would those people come to your cave? I used to have a lady that followed me around when I was doing youth ministry at a time when we were larger, not necessarily better quality, but we were a larger ministry. And she would just follow me around, and she would come to me with her pet causes of, this is what I need you to do. And then she'd tell me, I believe God has put me in your life to influence you to do all these ideas that I can't do myself. And she would follow me around. I mean, she had a husband who was half crazy, and she had all screwed up kids and like nothing real great going in her life, but she felt God had appointed her to me to tell me how to use my influence to do what she could not do, would not do herself. Like, yeah, you pastors know what that's like. Now ask me why the multi-billionaire success people are going to come to your cave. Like, there needs to be a little bit of a paradigm shift in our prayers. This lady, so you're going to come to me with your lack of influence to tell me how to use my influence better, to get me to do your great idea that you can't, don't, won't do yourself. Hard pass. So when we're making our prayers for money, for reinforcements and those things, that screwed up bunch with you, they're what you got. That is the regiment that God decided, this special division is who I believe that this is where you're at as a pastor. You can handle these guys. We'll see what you do with the band of misfits. We'll see what you do with all these broken, incapable, incompetent, messed up people. You don't get reinforcements until you deal with Johnny here, and you deal with these people. Let's see what you do with that. But what you need to do when you're not where you need to be is take a look around and see who's actually hanging out with you in your pathetic cave. Like, who's beside you? Not who's the most talented, not who has the best marketing skills. Like, who's there? Like, who's actually hanging out with you? Hot stuff. Who's hanging out with you? We can see from Jesus, and when his family's petitioning him, Jesus, what? They're calling without, he looks around him. Who he looked round about. Who's my mother, my brother, my sister? Those who do the will of God. That's who you got. So you have to recognize, first of all, you have to stop looking for someone to rescue you in your ministry. I don't see many inspiring Bible stories where the enemy is about to sweep in and then dun-da-da, in comes the cavalry. No, it's like Gideon's army stayed Gideon's army. Right. There wasn't like the troops from afar coming in to rescue the 300. That's not what God does. We know from Jonathan and his armor bearer's example, he saves by many or by few, and it's usually few. But all of our Christian life is a combination of faith and stewardship. Right. All of it. Right. And if you're all about faith, and faith is strong, but there's no stewardship going on, it's because there's no vision for the stewardship. Faith should be producing through practical application, not mysticism.
Thank you. Yes.
Practical application. Practical application. I have a sermon called Intercessors Come Out of the Prayer Closet. Because an intercessor is not someone who stays in the prayer closet. An intercessor is someone who goes into a prayer closet, comes out with the power of God, and intercedes. But we have, sometimes as a church, we turn prayer into our place to hide from reality.
That's exactly right.
When Jesus didn't just stay praying on the mountain, it was critical to everything he did, but he received power from his Father to leave the mountain.
Yes.
And our ministry, our life, has to be a combination of faith and stewardship. And of course, conversely, if you're busy doing stuff, but your faith is weak, you'll get into presumption and you'll lose your spiritual discernment and probably just burn out. So you got to have both. So again, this morning, I don't want to instruct you on doctrine and faith as much as I desire to help you come up in your stewardship to bear more fruit in your ministry assignments that outlives and outlasts you. In this workshop, I want to share some principles of discipleship, because discipleship is the stewardship side of ministry that ensures your faith does not die with you. Your preaching and teaching alone are not what sustains your ministry. It's discipleship. And discipleship is the stewardship side of your faith. This workshop is entitled, "You Don't Have What It Takes, and They Don't Have What You Need." You don't have what it takes, and they don't have what you need. So there you are in your cave with some family members and a large band of misfits. That's a church, folks. Or if you like, that's your regiment that God has assigned you. Reinforcements aren't coming, and you will keep getting messed up people who can't help you. This isn't your dream, Pastor. This isn't what you wanted. This isn't your kingdom come. This is your ministry. And with this ministry, your dreams are hopeless. Your plans are spoiled and your kingdom come ain't coming. And as long as you're juggling both, you're stuck. Those frustrating goofballs are going to crush your dream because they're not what you need. And then conversely, you don't even have what it takes. You can't get your dream. So you can talk about being saddled with these backwards folk, but you don't have what it takes either. What a predicament. So either way, your dream must die. Your ministry ambition must die. You can quit and find a better cave with better amenities, higher class runaways that you hope will still follow you for some reason. Like maybe there's some great millionaire that's going to come to your cave and just let you boss them around and do everything that you want to fulfill your dream. Maybe. Probably not. You can just change, look for the better caves, but it's just going to be, at the end of the day, another disappointing scenario, different players, same problem. What are you supposed to do? Make disciples. You know, part of Isaac's legacy of faith, Abraham, of course, was a greater example of faith in the patriarchs, but Isaac's legacy, you know, Abraham, when famine hit, he went to Egypt. Isaac comes along, famine hits, God says, no, you don't go to Egypt. You stay here in the famine. And Isaac, part of his legacy of faith is that he dug a well. And instead of just running when it got hard or looking for some better alternative, he dug a well and he sowed in famine. And he prospered in the midst of famine by just digging down what's around me, where am I supposed to be? Let's do something about it. Within that band of weirdos that have flocked to you exist the raw materials for mighty men and women of valor. Reinforcements aren't coming. This is your regiment. Give them what you have, and by the grace of God, they will become what you need. I've heard tons of times, we have had guest ministers that have come through to our church. I don't know if she's in here right now, but I've heard it over and over again. I wish our church had a Libby. Did you know that back in 2012, when we hired Libby, I was not super excited about that prospect? Did you know that Libby, she'd finished school, and she just offered to come on the maintenance team and by the way, today, if you don't know who Libby is, she's like MVP. She's got her hand in everything. Full disclosure, I've never been anyone's first pick at anything either. And anything I've ever done, they're like, you know, basically ministry life falling apart. Well, I guess we could put Chase in there. So Libby comes to me, and she's like, can I just work like 20 hours? And like, well, yeah, you're not really on the radar of everything that's going on. I mean, I'm not really particularly looking for that, but we could use some maintenance help, sure. Well, and then over the course of time, like things just start blowing up, like people blowing up. And there's Libby. And Libby basically was promoted by continuing to breathe. And she knew almost nothing. And there were times, and there'd be something broke, and I'd be like, Libby, we got to fix that. And she'd say, well, we don't know how to fix that. We discovered you better watch some YouTube videos. And Libby is a mighty woman of valor. But it's because she stayed in the cave. It's because she was faithful. It's because she was there. She didn't win talent search. She didn't win like the American Idol of helps ministry. She just was there. She was there when other people disintegrated because they couldn't stand the leadership. She was there when she had reason not to be able to stand the leadership. But she stayed. It's called discipleship. 4 points on making disciples. Point 1, share the cave. Mark 3:31-33. Then his brothers and his mother came, and standing outside, they sent to him, calling him. And a multitude was sitting around him, and they said to him, look, your mother and your brothers are outside seeking you. But he answered them, saying, who is my mother or my brothers? And he looked around in a circle at those who sat about him and said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God is my brother and my sister and mother. There are those standing outside that are sending for you, always presenting another option than the one in front of you. Look at who's around you. Look around the circle and see who is there while you're doing the will of God. Those are your people. Disciple them. Books don't create disciples. Podcasts don't create disciples. Preaching doesn't create disciples. Social media following doesn't create disciples. Live streams don't create disciples. Celebrity status does not create disciples. YouTube doesn't create disciples. Those things might draw disciples, but they don't create disciples. Discipleship requires communion. One of my favorite books of all time is The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And he lays out 2 chief components of discipleship as modeled by our Lord Jesus, and that is 1, the preaching of the word. But how many of you know Jesus preached the word to the multitudes? But someone that's part of your multitude ministry is not a disciple. Someone that follows you on social media is not a disciple. The other component of discipleship is fellowship. The thing that changed the disciples was not just the hearing and the preaching and the teaching of the word, because the multitudes had that. The thing that changed the disciples was fellowship and the preaching of the word, both. Communion. And I've heard a lot, and maybe you've heard a lot too, and it's a real thing. It's taught all the time, especially if you came up in a certain segment of Word of Faith. There's a lot said about the sin of familiarity. It is a problem, the sin of familiarity. But let me produce some contrast for you. If you don't have familiarity, what do you have? Unfamiliarity. Familiarity risks getting a Judas. But unfamiliarity is word without intimacy. I got news for you. You can't avoid familiarity and make a disciple. You can have a multitude ministry fan base and avoid familiarity, but you won't have a legacy. I would say with one possible distinction, and that is the prophetic ministry, usually much of their legacy is the message. But in terms of pastoral things, and in terms of ministry, in terms of discipleship, people are the legacy. So your people are going to get familiar with you. So don't be a jerk. Live clean and holy. Don't put stumbling blocks in front of them. Up your game. Get and be better. They're going to get familiar with you. So be better. Because the root of familiar is family. And so what I'm not saying you don't have certain things, but many of us are parents, right? Like, there are things that you give up because what may be acceptable for you is not acceptable for them, so you stop it. You stop it. You don't put a stumbling block before them. You don't need to fight as a pastor, as a man of God, for your boundaries. That's not our mission. We're to make disciples. You have them. Like, you need to enforce, but not to the point where you're disconnected. You know, there's times mom and dad need to be away from the kids. But you're not going to parent your kids with a Facebook Live video. So we just have to be better people. Now, I know Jesus was perfect and had a Judas, so you're going to have some Judases no matter what you do. You do it perfect, you're going to have Judases. But you know what? It's just baked into the cake. You just take it and be better. And don't put stumbling blocks. If you have weaknesses that you're afraid that they will see, then stop it. John 10, 11 through 16 says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But a hireling, he who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. What do we see there? That is pastor putting their self-interest first above the sheep. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and does not care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep and am known by my own. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. So here we see some important verbs on the good shepherd. He gives, he defends, he knows, and is known, lays down his life, and speaks. That's the good shepherd. The hireling, not a shepherd, no ownership, no warning, leaves the sheep in danger, flees in self-interest, does not care. If you want to make disciples, you better be ready to share the cave. You have to, if you're going to make disciples. Point 2. The master is greater than the servant, and the greatest among them is servant of all. The master is greater than the servant, and the greatest among them is servant of all. John 13, verse 12 through 17. So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments, and sat down again, he said to them, do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. And it says in Matthew 20, verse 25 through 28, but Jesus called them to himself and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. Then it says in 1 Corinthians 9:19, it says, for though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. Now, why am I talking about service? Part of the reason service is so important is because you're in their lives. You're in their lives. At one point in youth ministry, I am very teacher-oriented. I am way deep in the details on things. And there's a time as a youth pastor, and I'm just observing, there is not one kid in this entire youth group that's like remotely like me. Like, they don't care about the details. They don't care. They are not motivated the same way in teaching and study and understanding research. They're not connected that way. And it just began to occur to me that even though I was a teacher and that was the gifting or part of the gifting that I was to impart to them, the issue was they are not wired that way. And so I can talk and I can give them all kinds of information, but at the end of the day, they're gonna be like, well, yeah, I believe that. Pastor Chase said that. I'm sure it's true. It's good enough for me. He studies a lot. Okay, anyway, did you see that movie? They were not going to latch on to understanding these things just by virtue of hearing me say them. So it became apparent to me in youth ministry that even though I was a teacher, what they really needed was a trainer. Because my gifting was not going to impact them to the level that it needed to unless they were trained, in addition to just hearing me speak. Because for a season, what happened is I would teach. I would fill these kids with so much information. And they could answer the Bible questions. They could answer, you could drill them and they could spew out some facts. But then because they weren't trained the way that they needed, they weren't reflecting it in their life, which is the whole point. And so some of what our ministry created earlier on through a season when we called it Club 180 and it was just like intense. I mean, we had some wonderful things that God did. But there's intense teaching is a big component of it. It created some of the most hard-hearted, proud, arrogant, mental assent Christian teenagers that would just live in total sin and then, oh, here's the Bible answers. You know, we don't want to produce that. So I had to go from being a teacher to being a trainer, and there were no teachers. I had no clones. There was no protege. And frankly, when you see ministries where the people coming up under them are clones, it's kind of creepy. Like, as a pastor, we're not just trying to find the next clone. You know what would happen if you clone yourself? You'd have two people that don't have what it takes. What you would do is you would magnify all your strengths, but guess what? Your blind spot just doubled in size. Your weaknesses grew too. Don't waste time trying to clone your gifting in others. You already don't have what it takes. You don't want to have a team of two that don't have what it takes. You have to work with the raw materials you have, not the raw materials you want or the raw materials that you can possibly deceive yourself that you think you need before you can do anything. What do you have? It's the lesson we've talked about. I believe it's Shamgar, the mighty man of valor who killed a bunch of Philistines with an ox goad. Why? There's no swords. So what was he good at? Farming tools. Really hurting people with farming tools. That's what he had. So why is he a mighty man of valor? Because he used what he had in his hand. Us as stewards of the grace of God have to use what we have. We just have to use what we have, not what we want, not what we think we need, what we have. In serving them, when you're making disciples, you're not forcing round pegs in square holes to accomplish your dream. That's only going to go so far. Let me say that again. You're not forcing round pegs in square holes to accomplish your dream. You are training round pegs to fit round holes. And adjusting your plans to utilize around the holes. Your vision may come from God, but the path to get there is not producing excellent plans crafted in an ivory tower that dysfunctional people are forced to fit. It is discipleship to produce excellent people that will improve your plans from on the ground because they are capable and empowered to act and because they have learned your heart and not just your commands. You are not trying to make them fit your dream. You are to bring the best out of them because they have giftings from God that you don't have. And if you bring them to a place of excellence, they will begin to see for themselves how to use their gifting for the kingdom of God in a way that you can't because you don't have what it takes and they don't have what it takes. But if you will pour what you have into them, then God's grace will come and you'll have disciples to carry the vision when you're dead. If you want to make disciples, you better be ready to share the cave, and you better be ready to demonstrate service as the greatest servant among them. Point 3, promote them as chosen friends worth your sacrifice, not promote yourself as the martyr they don't deserve. I'll say that again. Promote them as chosen friends worth your sacrifice, not promote yourself as the martyr they don't deserve. John chapter 15, verse 11 through 17. These things I have spoken to you. This is Jesus' heart talking to his disciples. That my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends. For all things that I heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. These things I command you, that you love one another. Hear the heart of Christ for his disciples. There's no self-service in any of this. And we've talked before that when Jesus is calling them friends, it's almost like a scary thing. Because he's not just like, Jesus, the illustration, Jesus, hey, I'm a friend of Jesus. Well, are you really? I mean, are you a friend of Jesus? And he's like, first of all, the prerequisite is that you serve him. Like, you've obeyed his commands. You've learned what he wants. You're doing what he says. That's part of knowing him. You can't really know Christ if you don't serve. You're not his friend if you haven't dialed in and been obedient to his commands. If you don't know me, or if you don't obey my commands, I don't even know you. You don't know me if you don't obey my commands. But when he calls them friends, he's not just like, hey, I'm Jesus, I'm everybody's friend. He's saying, I'm promoting you to step into my office because I'm going to be gone. I am turning over the family business to you weirdos, because your trial of discipleship is ending, and you're going to carry the torch. What incredible faith that Jesus had in these guys who weren't that great at this point in time. So let's ask ourselves, as we think about Jesus' heart, and again, the point, promote them as chosen friends worth your sacrifice, not promote yourself as the martyr they don't deserve. Do your words communicate that your desire is to bring them into fullness of joy? Or do your words communicate your expectation for them to bring you joy? Secondly, do you lay down your life out of love? Or do you lay down your life out of resentment, blaming the people you sacrifice for? And I want you to see, too, the parallels when we're talking about discipleship, that these are also principles that apply to parenting, because that's discipleship. Third thought, do your people serve you to promote you, or do they serve you because your heart is to promote them? Do your people believe that you choose them, or do your people believe your preferences lie elsewhere? Are you prioritizing them going and bearing fruit that remains? Or are you prioritizing your own harvest only? A little bit of a paradigm shift. Think about this, the heart of Jesus in making disciples. When Jesus called them friends, he was promoting them to lead the church in his stead. Wasn't Jesus telling them he wants to share a campfire with them and talk about how awesome they are and how he loves them so much? It was Jesus saying, you put in the work. You served me. We served together. I've shown you the ropes. I've taught you and trained you. Now I'm handing it all over because you've reached maturity. You aren't there yet, but you will be who you need to be when the time comes. I'm fully invested in you, and I love you. I'm going to do one final act expressing my love for you, and then here's the governance of the church. You don't promote someone because they've reached perfection and won't make any mistakes. You promote them because they've been faithful and obedient. Because their character has reached maturity. Their discipleship term is over. God has highlighted them in your place, and he is telling you it is time to let go, which includes you renouncing your desire to micromanage from afar. If you're going to make disciples, you better be prepared to share the cave, ready to demonstrate service as the greatest servant among them, and ready to take your own demotion to give them your promotion. Point 4. Freely you have received, freely give. Matthew 10, 7 through 8. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Everything that the disciples did serving Jesus, he demonstrated. Pastor Bill Tweed, he's not with us right now, so I'm going to just plagiarize him without any sort of accountability. He talked about in Household of Faith conference that he spoke out, he talked about a 6-stage training process for parenting. And it's the same for discipleship. Same. Step 1, watch me do it. Watch me do it. Step 2, do it with me. Do it with me. Step 3, Do it under my critique. Do it under my critique. Step 4, do it by yourselves. Do it by yourselves. Step 5, train others to do it. Step 6, train others to train others. Watch me do it. Do it with me. Do it under my critique. Do it by yourselves. Train others to do it. Train others to train others. What happens if you remove any one of those 6 steps? What if you took out the watch me do it part? Well, actions speak louder than words. We mimic behavior better than we follow directions. So if you're going to make disciples, they don't just need to hear you say it, they need to see you do it. And be a parent. They need to know you more than just the commander. They have to see you as the doer. Watch me do it. What if you took out do it with me? A lot of us would like to take that one out, especially if you're an introvert. Well, actions without relationships means people might respect your words, but if you don't do it with me, go ahead and keep doing it without me. That's what happens. If you don't ever do it with anybody, they'll just let you keep going. Okay? Nobody does it like you. You just keep doing it then. So they have to do it with you. I mean, this is one of the more irritating parts of parenting. Teaching your kids how to do chores when you want to just say, just get out of the way, I'll do it. Be done in 5 minutes. But it's because you're doing it with them, it takes you an hour. It's true discipleship too. They have to have opportunity to drive you up the wall and slow the whole process down and make everything stink. Because if they don't get experience with it, give them a few years, they'll stay as dysfunctional as they ever were. They will never grow up because you only get a return on investment. So if you don't invest it, you don't get that return that you want. Love, principle of sowing and reaping. So if you want good disciples, then you better sow. So that do it with me is so important because relationships. They'll just let you keep doing it if you don't share. And then the third stage, don't do it under my critique. Well, your actions and your relationships may inspire others to work, but the work will not be excellent without communicating and enforcing that standard. You should continue to strive to be better and to help them to have that attitude of excellence as I'm going to push a little harder. Philosophically, you see what's happening to this culture and how wimpy we are. How popular it is to be dysfunctional and to be a victim. How easy it is to be triggered. We are so wimpy and pathetic. And we can talk about life is hard. So how about we get stronger? Like, that seems to me a better option than victimhood. Let's just get stronger. Because, I mean, is that what God's grace does for us? His power working through, we just get stronger. I like that alternative. Rather than talking about life is so hard, let's just stop being so soft. Let's just get some more discipline going in our life. Where we're undisciplined, we sharpen up. You know what's hard? Going to the gym when you're fat. It's hard when you're paying the consequence for sloppy behavior for a long period and it's compounded. Oh, it's brutal and painful. But it saves your life. And you can choose the pain of inactivity, which gets worse. Like, choose your poison. Like, it stinks either way. It's just going to hurt. I'm not putting anybody down. over their weight. Please don't understand my heart here. I'm just giving that as an example because we've all dealt with that. So, well, everyone except like Von Ozzens. But whatever your area that's poor, you're not good with money, learn. Stop it. You can't read good, you're dyslexic, push through the pain. Sorry, there's actual studies like the cure for dyslexia is the suffering of reading. Like, because of how your brain's wired. This is your whole life. I mean, like, everything in life is your brain, your life, everything is wired to respond a certain way. And if you don't like the dysfunction in your life, then your wiring needs to be changed. You have to change your habits. It takes a couple weeks to set a habit. Like a couple weeks of push through intense, terrible pain, and it can change the trajectory of your life. And if you're going to change the trajectory of people's lives on a broader scale, then they have to see that you're even in your weak spots. They have to see that you're humble and you're working it. You're doing something about it. You're not just passive. You're not a complainer. You take personal responsibility. You step up. I mean, I know as on the kid end of it, I know what it meant to me to have times my father would humble himself and say, I did wrong as your father. We'd have these family meetings. My dad would say, I'm sorry. And my mom would say, yeah, he was right. He should be sorry. No, I'm just kidding. But humility means a lot to your kids because they know when you're doing a smokescreen. Well, pastors, probably your congregation know when you're fronting too. They probably know when you're overcompensating. So just work on it and have humility about it. But you got to have the relationship. You have to. There's got to be critique. There's got to be follow-up. You've got to help them get better. If they don't do it by themselves, if you can't let go of their hand, if you insist on micromanaging everything, you are keeping them from coming to maturity. You are keeping them in permanent adultolescence unless you let go of their hand at some point. You gotta let it go at some point if they're gonna come to maturity. What if you skip the no train others to do it? Well, the work dies with you. So what happens? There's a lot of ministries where the work is dying with them. What about no train others to train others? Well, the work dies with those you trained. We look at the example of Jesus. We'll move a little faster here. Watch me do it. Jesus set that example, washing the disciples' feet, modeling in John 13, 1 through 17. Do it with me. We see Jesus sharing in ministry, the feeding of the 5,000. See it in sharing in Mark 6, 32 through 44. Do it under my critique. We see that step in the life of Jesus when he's sending out the 12 and 70. Let's go do this. He's mentoring them. Train others to do it. We see that example in the book of Acts. It begins with empowering. Matthew 28, 18 through 20, go make disciples. Train others to train others. We see the multiplication aspect of ministry as we look at some of Paul's missionary journeys and that principle of multiplying in Acts 8, verse 1. If you want to make disciples, you have to share the cave, demonstrate service as the greatest servant among them, take a demotion to give them a promotion, and train them in everything through modeling, sharing, mentoring, empowering, reproducing, and multiplying. Last point. Again, you don't have what it takes and they don't have what you need, so lay it down and make disciples. Share the cave. The master is greater than the servant, and the greatest among them is servant of all. Promote them as chosen friends worth your sacrifice, not promote yourself as the martyr they don't deserve. And freely you have received, freely give. So how does the teacher become a trainer? Romans 12, 3 through 8, this is the last passage we're looking at here. For I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. For as we have many members in one body, but all the members do not have the same function, so we, being many, are one body in Christ and individually members of one another. Having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, let us prophesy in proportion to our faith. Or ministry, let us use it in our ministering. He who teaches in teaching, he who exhorts in exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. These are all examples of ministry. Through the grace given to me. So you use your grace not to fulfill the dream, but to bring out their grace. And in so doing, you accomplish the dream. God brings it back to life. If you want to train them to think soberly and not more highly than they ought, you have to model sober thinking and not think more highly of yourself than you ought. We are different. This is part of thinking soberly, both as a leader and as a follower. Presume nothing. Just as not everybody is on your level, nor possesses your authority as the leader, you do not possess the grace they have been given by God either. But you are commissioned to bring it out of them for the kingdom of God. Get them to use their gifts. They will use their gifts anyway, but with you training them, they will receive vision to use those gifts for the kingdom. That's the difference. They will begin to connect how their gifting applies to helping you accomplish the vision. Because you've developed them in their gift, and so they have vision for the kingdom because you've developed it in them. Prophecy gifts, service gifts, teaching gifts, exhorting gifts, giving gifts, leadership gifts, mercy gifts. What's described here in Romans 12. These gifts are common graces for believers, which means as a trainer, you will need to have your hand in all of them. You'll need to model all of them. You'll need to share in all of them. You'll need to mentor in all of them. You'll need to empower in all of them. You'll need to reproduce in all of them and multiply in all of them. This will transform your dysfunctional fellow cave dwellers into mighty men and women of valor, which in turn will fulfill the vision you do not have what it takes to accomplish and transform your people into the people you need. Next workshop is going to be entitled this, and then I'm done. Tomorrow's workshop is entitled, They Have What You Gave Them and Now You Aren't Needed. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll give lots of tools and illustrations. Thank you. Take a break.